All right, it is noon, so I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone and happy Friday. Welcome to Dyknow Office Hours. This is kind of a more Dyknow focused product event that we're holding today to wrap up Remote Learning Week. We had a really great week of sessions throughout this entire week focused on teaching strategies, technology tools, coaching tactics for remote learning. And we wanted to wrap up this week to focus on our Dyknow product and how Dyknow supports remote learning. So, something that we've learned throughout this week and through this whole remote learning process is now really isn't the time to start implementing new tools. It's time to figure out which tools are necessary for remote learning, figure out which tools are really going to enhance that remote learning environment and kind of make the best environment for the remote learning setting. So primarily what we've been wanting to do so far is create a remote learning community. So we've done this with the Technology Coaching Conference, Remote Learning Summit, and Remote Learning Week. We have all of those recordings from this week and last Friday up on our YouTube channel. So that playlist is called 2020 Remote Learning Week if you want to engage with that content. We also have the Tech Coach Con community, which is a PLN, PLC for you to utilize throughout this remote learning process. And lastly, we have the Tackling Tech podcast. So we've launched a lot of new things, new communities throughout this process of remote learning. One thing, as more people have come into our audience and new people have come into our audience, are a lot of questions about who we are at Dyknow, what we do, and what our product does. So we decided to host this event to give a little more information on who we are at Dyknow, what our product does, and how we support remote learning. So before we dive into our conversation today, we were recently featured by G2 as one of the top 3 remote learning softwares. So we were in the classroom management category because we are a classroom management software. That's how we categorize ourselves. And it had some really good information on what users like, what users might be looking for in the product, and gave a good background. So as we were gaining traction in this remote learning space, we really wanted to give some perspective internally from our team on how we support, come up with these 4 bullets on how our product supports remote learning in K-12 education. So firstly, giving teachers confidence that students are staying on task while learning new information on devices at home, providing teachers with the ability to redirect off-task students with a single click, reduces red tape by giving control directly to teachers rather than someone at the district office. We know communication and collaboration is a little more difficult during this time, so reducing that tape is important. And then lastly, detailed device distraction metrics at the class, school, and district level for administration to make more informed decisions about remote learning strategies. So these are just kind of some general bullets that we created to help you understand how Dyknow supports remote learning at the highest level. And the intention of today's event is to kind of dive deeper into what Dyknow looks like in a traditional classroom and then how that can translate over into the remote learning setting. So before we jump into this, one last little bit of housekeeping for what you can expect today. So this live stream is being recorded, as all of our webinars are, and it will be made available to everyone after the event, as well as published on our YouTube channel. I encourage everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you get notified when that happens. Additionally, we use the hashtag TechCoachCon for all of our events. So if you're a Dyknow customer, if you're new to our audience, please engage in that throughout this event. Let us know how you're using Dyknow or what questions you have about Dyknow. And we'd love to engage with you on Twitter using that hashtag. And then lastly, the Q&A and the chat tools are open during this. So we encourage you, if you have any questions about Dyknow, about remote learning, anything really, just submit that in the Q&A. We'll answer it at the end of this. And then additionally, if you have thoughts, suggestions, anything that you want to contribute, use that chat tool. We really encourage you all to engage with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will dive into this conversation. So today I'm joined by Devin Arms from Tippecanoe School Corporation, who is a Dyknow customer, and Casey Higgs, who is one of our school success managers at Dyknow. Really excited for this conversation today. Welcome to both of you. Would you, each of you, mind giving a little introduction to yourselves? Maybe Casey, you can start, and then Devin. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sierra. So I'm Casey Higgs. I am one of the school success managers at Dyknow. So I help support our customers through onboarding and training, as well as throughout their use of Dyknow. And I'm excited to be here and talk more about remote learning. Dyknow is a classroom management tool. And since we are cloud hosted and cloud-based, everything can be done remotely with Dyknow. Teachers only need a web browser to use it. So it has been very easy for many to transition into a remote learning environment with Dyknow because of that. But overall, as a classroom management software, we're focused on really three core things for teachers. And those three things are monitoring, blocking, the ability to control that activity, and then finally, class history. So all of the data that has been collected during that monitoring session is available to you for review after the class. So teachers ought to have peace of mind that they're not missing anything if they can't physically be in the same room with the student. So long as they're monitoring, all of that data is going to be is going to be there for them after class for them to review and take action on as they need.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey, for that.
You're
and
welcome.
Devin, do you want to give a little background into maybe your role at Tippecanoe, anything relevant to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm happy to be here today. As you said, my name is Devin Arms. I serve as the Director of Technology at the Tippecanoe School Corporation. We're located in Tippecanoe County, northwest of Indianapolis. We're in the Lafayette area, greater Lafayette, so part of our district touches West Lafayette, Lafayette, and surrounding towns. We have about 13,600 students, over 1,200 employees. We're a Google for Education district, so we have Chromebooks and most of our classrooms, grades 2 through 12. We have a one-to-one program at grades 6 through 12 for our middle schools and high schools, where the students take the devices home with them each day and even keep them throughout the summer. And we've been a Dyknow customer for, I think, almost 10 years now. So we've witnessed the product grow and change and evolve quite a bit in that time. And we have expanded our usage of Dyknow over the years to more grade levels and more students and teachers. And we're big fans of the product and feel that it's an important ingredient to what we do in the traditional classroom, as well as, potential for remote learning as well.
That's some great background. Thank you for sharing that. So I think what we're going to do today is dive a little bit into, Devin, your experience with Dyknow, using it in the classroom, kind of applications in a remote learning setting. And then we received a ton of questions from the audience specific to how Dyknow can facilitate remote learning. So we'll jump into those. Casey will help with that since she's a little more product focused. So Devin, would you mind giving us a bit of background on why you initially chose to implement Dyknow? Since you've been a customer for so long, I'm sure the initial implementation is different from how you use it now, but maybe just a little history background on that.
Sure. Well, like most districts, I think what initially led us to Dyknow was, classroom management. So, our teachers were very good at managing students in a traditional classroom without technology, but then, you change the environment and now every student has a device, and there are opportunities for misuse and distraction and that sort of thing. And so, we were looking for a tool to kind of help our teachers better manage that activity in the classroom. So I think that was the initial, problem that we were looking to solve. But kind of like you guys mentioned, the product has really grown over the years, and we now look at it as more than just a classroom management tool. We look at it as more of an engagement piece. Our teachers use it to kind of reflect on, their lessons and their teaching, whether students were on task or off task, whether they were interested in topics, that sort of thing. We do use it still for, to block websites in the classroom. And, teachers really like to use it when they're proctoring assessments and tests and those sort of things to make sure that students are, not cheating or misusing technology during the assessment. Yeah, so that's kind of what initially led us to choose Dyknow as the classroom management piece, and that's what's kept us as customers, as well as all of the new features that they can add over time that really just, are icing on the cake, I guess I should say, as far as how teachers are using it in the classroom.
Well, we appreciate you being a Dyknow customer for so long, and we're glad that your teachers are enjoying it. You spoke a little bit about, management and engagement. Could you talk a bit more about what your teachers have, maybe some anecdotes of how your teachers have used Dyknow for monitoring and engagement, and maybe how that has benefited them with technology integration over the past 10 years?
Sure. Well, again, we try to use it more as not just a monitoring tool, but a teaching tool. So, I think that we've recognized over the years that, just because our students know how to use technology, or they're digital natives, that they know how to use it, in an academic setting and use it responsibly. So we try to encourage our teachers to use Dyknow in a way that helps students understand, the right way to use technology, in the classroom in an academic setting. So, how they use technology at home on their smartphone, whether it's Snapchat or TikTok or whatever, is very different than how we want them to use their device in the classroom. And that's just not a natural thing that they know, or that they know how to do. And so Dyknow plays a role in helping kind of scaffold that, I guess, in terms of, teachers can allow lists of websites that they know are related to the topics for the day, and so those are the websites students are going to go to, and then they can gradually either add to that list or pivot to a blocking plan where they allow everything, but then only block certain sites that they know are popular distractions for that specific class or grade level. So it provides teachers with a lot of flexibility. They can be very, very strict, maybe at the beginning of the year, and then as they develop more trust with their students, and the students become more competent in using technology, they can kind of gradually expand students' access and allow them more freedom in terms of what they're able to do on the devices.
That makes a lot of sense. I like especially what you said with kind of that digital citizenship part. I think that's something that we've tried to transition more towards, because we are a monitoring and blocking tool, and a teacher tool first and foremost. We encourage teachers to start off with those blocking plans, but then take the training wheels off, so that students can really become those digital citizens inside and outside of the classroom. What would you say are the largest benefits to you as an administrator for having Dyknow in classrooms?
I think that it's nice to be able to empower the teachers to take more control over how their students are using technology. So, in an environment where you don't have a tool like Dyknow, I think that, it's very common for teachers to reach out to their IT folks or their technology department to, how do I handle this? How do I block this website? Can you guys block this website for everybody? I don't think this is appropriate. There's just a lot of inefficient and unnecessary back and forth between teachers and admin or IT about how to help manage those behaviors in the classroom. But, with Dyknow, it really empowers the teachers to take control over that learning environment. And that makes sense because, every teacher approaches it differently. One teacher may be much more comfortable with students, having free time and being able to do things, on the internet that are of interest to them. And another teacher may take a more strict or rigid approach to that. So really for me as an administrator, it's nice to just be able to say, hey, this tool can work for you regardless of what your approaches are. If you want to use it in a way that's punitive or very, strict, you can do that. Obviously, it's not, we'd like to see move away from that gradually, but it can be what you need it to be, I guess, and it's very flexible, and it's nice to be able to have flexible options like that can meet the needs of most of your staff.
That makes a lot of sense from an administrator perspective. Then kind of transitioning into outside of the traditional classroom into more of the remote learning setting. Even though I know you're not currently using Dyknow for remote learning, how do you see Dyknow as being beneficial for maybe your remote learning plan in the future, or features and functionality that might benefit the remote learning setting?
Sure. So, we kind of got thrown into the remote learning, situation really quickly, like many districts around the state and even the country. And we had never done remote learning before this. So we never took advantage of it for snow days or cancellations or anything like that. So it was kind of a new topic for all of us at our district. And so, with everything else going on, we decided that we didn't want to just throw Dyknow into the mix, without setting clear expectations and guidelines and talking with our teachers about how it should be used in a remote setting and what's appropriate. Looking ahead to next school year and beyond, I definitely think that it will be a part of our remote learning strategy, just because it works just as well off-site as it does on-site, because it's completely cloud-based and lives in the web browser. It's lightweight. We don't really need to do anything on our end, aside from some configuration changes to make it available for teachers to use off-site with their students off-site. So from the technology side, it will be easy to accomplish making that available. And then as far as, working with our staff on how to use it in a remote setting and what we feel like the best practices are there, I think we'll talk to them about, the differences between synchronous remote learning and teaching and asynchronous remote learning and teaching. And, if you're giving your students flexibility to work, at any time during the day, it might not make sense to be monitoring them, from 8:30 to 3:30 or whatever, or maybe you only utilize Dyknow to monitor them, during, a direct instruction lesson or during an assessment. So I think it will look a little different than what it looks like in a traditional classroom, but I also feel that, it will still be a powerful tool for them to at least feel like they have some oversight of what their students are doing at home, and hopefully helping facilitate those conversations between the teacher and the students as far as what the expectations are for remote learning. I need you to be on task. I need you to be responsible for completing your work and taking assessments with fidelity, just like you would in the regular classroom.
Yeah, I like that application a lot. So you already touched on this a little bit, but how do you think, from not just a teaching perspective, from an admin perspective, how Dyknow would maybe improve remote learning or support remote learning?
I think, again, we're still kind of new to remote learning, like many. And so I think that it would probably just provide a comfort level for many of our teachers that is lacking right now. I think that the feedback we've gotten over the past few weeks has been, I'm building my remote learning lessons, I'm putting materials out there, but I just don't know if students are what they're doing. And I don't know if Dyknow is going to provide, that complete transparency there, but I think it could at least help teachers feel a little more connected to their students and help them feel like they are still getting some oversight as far as the activities that students are doing, and are they engaged and on task at times during the day when I expect them to be. So.
Yeah, I think that engagement part is huge. We've heard throughout the week, as we've been talking more about remote learning, that communication and nurturing relationships with students during this time is kind of the most important thing that teachers can be doing and any staff members can be doing. So switching gears a little bit, thank you for that context and input of how Tippecanoe is using Dyknow. Casey, I'm going to rope you into the conversation now, and we'll touch on some that we received throughout this week and throughout the entire month, actually, since we've been hosting our technology coaching conferences. So Casey, from your perspective, how can Dyknow be used remotely?
Dyknow can be used remotely in the pretty much the exact same way it can be used in a normal traditional classroom. That is in terms of how the teacher engages with the features and can monitor, restrict activity, and review the class history data. Since we are cloud-based, that can happen anywhere. The main difference with remote learning and in terms of how teachers use Dyknow is really just with the class structure, as Devin was just touching on. That piece is a little bit different for each teacher, it seems, but it's very common. I've heard that many teachers are now hosting office hours. And to Devin's point, it's just them finding different ways to engage with students, whether it's group work, whether it's a test, whether it's one-on-one time with a student, finding those times to decide when to monitor and decide when to try to promote digital citizenship and ensure students are on task. That's the biggest piece that's changed.
Makes a lot of sense. Can you talk about, so one thing that I think customers are interested in is kind of the privacy and security concerns that come with monitoring students who are in their homes. Could you talk a little bit about the admin settings, maybe how working around that is possible?
Absolutely. So Dyknow, we run on Amazon Web Services. So in that sense, on our end, data security is always there. It's always very important. Anyone interested in our privacy policy or any more information like that can always find it on our website and in our help center. But on the student end, in terms of security, it's really that engagement piece, Tara, that you mentioned, working with parents to make sure they understand what's happening, because it might be that Dyknow is used at home for the first time as well. Just like Devin, what you said. So educating the parents as much as the students on what the expectations are in terms of when they should be on or not, what they are going to be monitoring or not, et cetera, et cetera. So, on top of that though, integrity security wise, the class history is really one of the best ways to look at how successful, I guess, if you will, or how on task your students were. It's that, once again, that peace of mind, that data that's always there. So I recommend, when you're monitoring, if it's for a test, if it's for anything, that you want to track the data for, spin up a monitoring session and enforce a blocking plan. An allow-only blocking plan specifically is going to help ensure that your students are staying exactly on the specific websites or applications that you want. So testing then is that much more secure, and any other group work, cheating, things like that, you just got that paper trail to reference. So an allow-only blocking plan is definitely going to help with that. But I guess the final piece I would say is, going back to that communication with students, remind them that they signed documentation on how to use their device securely and how to, just be smart when using it, not download crazy extra things just because they're not in class. This is still a device that's provided by school likely, and it needs to be treated with respect. So, just that reminder as well. Students that want to cheat and whatnot, they're always going to find a way. We've learned that this, remote learning is obviously so much different than everyone being physically together. But Dyknow just, is that extra peace of mind is, I think, the biggest point there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with remote learning, especially for assessments and things like that, where maybe that integrity, you need to make sure that it's there. Dyknow is really useful for that. So one thing I wanted to talk about with you is I've seen on Twitter a ton of teachers being really creative with using Dyknow. There was a teacher last week who tweeted a photo of her, she had covered her student's name, but tweeted a photo of their screen blown up in a big screen, which is a feature that we have on Dyknow, and she had helped guide her student to logging into their online textbook by using Dyknow's Big View. So it's really cool to see teachers being so creative with the product, maybe not using every feature how we imagined it to be used, but finding these really creative ways. Are there specific features or I guess different use cases you've seen throughout this remote learning process that teachers have been using Dyknow for, or maybe talking to you about since you're customer facing?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, we've seen a ton of new teachers using. I think those that always knew they had Dyknow or had access to it, but really just never pulled the trigger for whatever reason. So a lot of new users, and that's really exciting. One thing that I noticed that I don't think I would have necessarily expected is the use of our Ask a Question feature as polling. So, whether it's just asking standard questions related to the lesson plan or something a little bit more personalized, like, hey, we've tried a lot of new tools now, in this remote environment. Which one do you like the best? Which of the tools that we've tried do you think is going to be best for group work moving forward? Which style do you prefer of my lesson plans that I've given? What times do you prefer for office hours? Literally anything like that to help, just hear from students, let them provide feedback and guide the way that you continue to build those lesson plans and engage with them, because their feedback is important. And this is, once again, new for everyone. So if you don't know something, just ask. If you're not sure, there's absolutely no reason you can't just ask students.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, I think, what kind of feedback you get.
I think that's really applicable. We had a conversation with Sarah Margison on Wednesday, who is from Tippecanoe as well. And she was talking about how it's so important during this time to gather student feedback, especially from the teacher perspective, and see, what instructional strategies they've been using that students really like and want to see in the classroom, and maybe what's different that they don't want to see in the classroom anymore that they've realized might not be their learning style. And it's brought out a lot of autonomy and customization for students and learning. So I think using Dyknow and the polling and asking a question feature to gather feedback is a great suggestion there. So we touched on this a little bit, but we received a question asking to learn more about how a teacher can use Dyknow to communicate with students during remote learning.
Yes. So currently Dyknow does not support the full two-way chat. However, there are a few different ways that teachers can reach out to students through Dyknow. And these tools were designed to encourage students, to get back on task if they were off task, or to otherwise guide them through something to ensure that they stayed focused on what they were doing. Excuse me. And one of those is the Ask a Question feature that I just mentioned. A good example of that would be maybe you're delivering a class live through, Google Hangouts, and you get to a point where it's time to either transition to another topic, or you really just want to get a gut check. A quick poll or a quick request for student understanding is a great way to pause, sort of assess the room when you're not physically in the room, right? When there are lots of different rooms. Of course, it's difficult to have, 10 plus people on a meeting like this and get everyone's feedback. So that sort of, digital feedback is a very seamless way to, get the thumbs up from everyone and okay, move on, or see if there may be additional questions and you should linger on the topic a little bit more, give another example, et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely. Devin, is that something that teachers at your district utilize throughout class, the kind of polling communication? Is that something you've heard a lot?
Yeah, and that feature has developed over the past couple of years, and I think that teachers do like it for, just kind of quick checks for understanding, or, exit polls or tickets, things like that. Just kind of very fast formative assessment. They like those tools.
Definitely.
The third one I did mention, actually, Tiara, is the send a message piece. And I apologize for that. That's the one I think that has historically been most popular in more of the traditional classroom. And I think now what teachers are finding is that's where, I guess, more personalization per student comes into play. Hey, how are you feeling? More of the, emotional gut check about student well-being and how they're handling learning remotely.
Definitely.
Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, oh my gosh, of course. So then this is a question that I'm assuming was submitted by a current Dyknow customer. They were asking, how can we extend our hours of monitoring for students? Can we monitor all students at the same time instead of just in classes?
Yes, great question. This has absolutely been a popular one since this remote learning situation began for us all. First and foremost, monitoring hours are something that are set by your Dyknow administrator. So if for any reason you don't know who your Dyknow administrator is, you can always reach out to us on support. We're happy to just look up that person's name and email, no big deal. But your Dyknow administrator is the one that through the setup process and the maintenance of your account will determine exactly when, what days of the week, and what time frames from start to finish any teacher can monitor any student within your school or district. So if for some reason you're trying to monitor and you get that pop-up about timing restrictions, et cetera, your Dyknow administrator is definitely the one to reach out to and have that conversation with, because that's a security issue. In terms of support, we can't just go in and update everything so that, you're monitoring on Saturdays and Sundays and, at midnight and all hours of the day. It is totally possible, though, to extend those hours given the non-traditional class structure that's going on. And that's, once again, just a conversation to have with your administrator. It's super easy to do. In Dyknow, the feature is called blackout settings. It's within the Dyknow admin settings, of course, but blackout settings, they restrict the days of the week and then the times at which you can begin monitoring and monitor them throughout the day.
Yeah, and I think that adds into the kind of question on security and privacy as well, just so that during this time of remote learning, those blackout settings are set up appropriately so that teachers have access to monitor whenever class may be going on, but parents and students have that peace of mind that teachers don't have monitoring access every hour of every day. There are still limitations, even with remote learning in place. So I think that's a great feature to call out. Some teachers might not even be aware that that exists and that their admins can change it. So I think that's a really good feature to call out. Question on remote support, tech support for staff or students.
Yeah, so for staff, I'll speak to that first. Dyknow support hours have not changed. So we are here Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, whether that's via phone, via email, via chat. We're here to help, so don't hesitate to use it. I think that in-product chat support, of course, is most helpful when you're actually monitoring, when you're using the product. And that's the way I think we most engage. It's the most popular way to reach out to support as well. But if for some reason, we're not live, right? It's after hours, we'll still follow up with you the next day. So, continue to use it. Don't wait on us. And for, other technical support, I would recommend considering something like office hours, just like teachers are doing for students. Maybe set up some technical office hours with your tech team to just be available to teachers that are having issues. I realize troubleshooting is a little bit different, but given the remote nature, of course, troubleshooting is going to have to be remote anyway. So in that sense, having that dedicated time with your tech team is at least going to help them feel less overwhelmed, I think, when they're dealing with more strange requests or, they're just having more difficulty troubleshooting because it is remote. So for students, once again, office hours, I would say the same thing. Just set expectations and, be there to deliver on them.
Yeah, definitely. Devin, is there anything you'd have to add on, I guess, remote tech support that has worked for you guys at Tippecanoe with remote learning?
It's definitely different now. We've had to establish new ways of, remoting into teacher laptops to provide direct support since we're not there with them physically. We've had more email correspondence directly with students where, in the past, typically it just goes through the teacher and we don't really correspond directly with students, but that's, we've started seeing more of that, which is fine. I think that we just have to continue to think about how we can provide, that effective level of support remotely to both students and staff. And so we're having conversations internally about, do we expand the use of our help ticket system to students? Do we, Do we allow them to access some of the support options that we've previously made available only to staff in the past? So again, the conversations are ongoing, but I think we all recognize that it's different now. And so we need to figure out how we can and pivot to still provide the same level of service that our folks are used to.
Definitely. It's a learning process. I love, Casey, your idea of office hours. I think that's great to have a designated time for it. Casey, could you talk a bit about Dyknow's ability to integrate with different LMS systems? I know we had a question come in asking about Dyknow integrating with Google Classroom, and I know during remote learning, teachers might be utilizing these resources more to facilitate learning.
Absolutely. So I think the best situation I've heard about is using the send a message feature to push out a URL. So if you have a specific tool or resource like that that you want to use, you can direct students exactly to where it is, where it's hosted, whatever it is you want to share, so that sort of actually helps sometimes with the troubleshooting as well, the ability to send a message, but to be able to point students to exactly where you want them to go and exactly what you want them to look at is something that I would say ties into the LMS situation in terms of sharing content with students. With Google Classroom, though, and other LMSs, we don't truly integrate in terms of pulling in that content. Or those rosters, depending on what functionality there is. Specifically for Google Classroom, though, there's definitely a reason for that. It's something we've considered in the past, but the way that we've designed Dyknow, or the way that our teams have designed Dyknow, is to trust the data imports as the source of truth. So, teachers, once they're logging into Dyknow, whether it's the first time or the 500th time, all of their class data should be there, right? They shouldn't need ever to create classes. So once again, we're importing that source of truth, and we know that to be the source of truth because usually they're integrated, it's syncing daily, etc. With Google Classroom, go ahead.
Just to interrupt you. So that's coming from the student information system, correct?
Yes, that's correct. But I'm clarifying that, though, because with Google Classroom, you don't have that source of truth. Teachers can edit their own rosters or create their own classes. And in addition to that, students can actually leave those class rosters. So there's just a lot more risk involved there. And that's why, specifically with Google Classroom, we've never, looked into an integration further. We want teachers to be able to trust the data and the admins to be able to trust that the imports are working and pulling in that source of truth, which is their SIS data. That's where it's all maintained.
Makes a lot of sense. I guess, so we're nearing the end of the questions. One other thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up is so we had a question about polling students and student engagement, which we've already talked about. Can we talk a little bit more about that data collection? So how does that data get collected? What does it look like for teachers once they've ended monitoring or ended a class? And how can both teachers and admins use that over a period of time?
Great question. The class history portion of Dyknow is definitely my favorite, and I am constantly promoting it because I want to make sure every teacher is using it that's using Dyknow. It is the one feature I think that allows you to truly be a teacher and do what you need to do in terms of focusing on your students and learning, not technology and getting distracted with just trying to incorporate it because you're supposed to. So regularly referencing that class history data always gives you an idea of, of course, what students have been doing when you were monitoring them. But really, it's going to help you learn more about your students. When they have the freedom to look things up, what do they look up? What resources do they use more than others? Are there gaps missing? For example, maybe you introduced a new website, some type of resource that, helps for X, Y, or Z. Well, there's a handful of students that aren't using it. Why is that so? Maybe it's time to engage with that student and ask them just exactly why. Is it a technical issue? Is it something that you simply forgot about? Overall, it's promoting learning your students more, giving you data that can, help you make decisions about how to help them learn. and how to see where they're thriving or what areas they might need a little bit more help on. It's also going to give you a really good pulse, whether you're a teacher or an admin, as to just how well students are progressing along that digital citizenship, route. Are they progressively getting better and trying to go on YouTube less because it's blocked every time? Or, are they actually getting, figuring it out, I guess. That class history data then can be used, to help with grading, to help you continue to enhance your blocking plan so that they're more effective each class. But I think the one, I think the biggest opportunity with it is those conversations with students. Why were you doing this? Just tell me. Did you know you were on YouTube this much? Quite frankly, they might not. Sure, they know they're on YouTube a lot because they like to watch videos, but do they really understand that, wow, of the last, 4 weeks of class, I've spent, 50% plus of that on YouTube, just being real and being human and showing them what you can see can be really powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's something, Casey and I go to a lot of events together, and that's something we hear a lot from customers we see at events is with the class history, teachers will say, I showed my students what they were doing. They had no idea how much time they were spending off task. And that kind of gave them the realization to be like, I'm spending this much time in school. I should be focusing on school, and kind of encouraging them to be better digital citizens. I also think, we hear this sometimes, but it's a great way to identify maybe gaps in your district level content filter or school level content filter. If there are sites that, all students are going to throughout the duration of class, and that's something that you just want to nip in the bud from a district perspective or school perspective, great way to inform that higher level content filter. So that is also one of my favorite features of our product. That was kind of all of the product focused questions that we received. If anyone has additional questions about how to use Dyknow, if you're a current customer, throw those in the Q&A and we'd be happy to answer them. Casey, anything additional you want to add for Dyknow for remote learning or remote learning in general?
Yeah, I think I'd like to share, maybe just a couple reminders about how Dyknow does monitoring so that teachers have just that reference for, maybe why a student might not be connecting right away. For teachers, you just need a device with the internet. Well, remember, for students, there's actually something installed on their device. So likely you've monitored them before. We know that installed piece is there. But the other troubleshooting tips I just want to remind you all is that, remember that this is not a traditional classroom environment anymore. But for Dyknow, in order to be monitored, a student must still be actually logged onto that laptop or that device, whatever that school managed device is. So they must be logged on while you're monitoring them, and they must be logged on with that correct username or email address for Chromebooks, right? Because that's how Dyknow identifies who's who. If I have a MacBook or a Windows device as a student, it's that username, right? My username, my device login must match the username that's in Dyknow. For Chromebook devices, it's simply the email address, but otherwise the same thing applies. So, in addition to the installation of that cloud connector, the device must be logged into with the correct credentials, and then the device must be connected to the internet. So these are just a few basic quick checks that a teacher can do, ideally if they can communicate with a student outside of Dyknow as well, to get them connected to Dyknow and get them in that monitoring session should they not be connected right away. Also, a good old reboot is, never a bad thing.
Those are good tips. And I think, addressing them up front rather than sourcing questions is a really good way to make teachers aware that these are issues that might come up and there are easy ways to troubleshoot them. Devin, anything you want to add in terms of remote learning, Dyknow or not Dyknow specific? I know we had a lot of conversations with Sarah Margison recently, which were great about how Tippecanoe is facilitating remote learning, but anything else you want to add?
Not in particular. Yeah, Sarah's a great resource, and she could probably speak to it a lot more fluently than I can. But, you know, like I said, we really value being a Dyknow customer. We feel that it's a critical tool in our toolbox for successful technology use in our schools, and we look forward to having it available in the future for remote learning, because we think it could be just as powerful there as well.
Well, we appreciate your support and utilization as a customer. For anyone who's joining us today who is a current Dyknow customer, as Casey mentioned, we're always here for you. We are still working. So feel free to chat in on dyknow.me, email support. I think it's Dyknow support at dyknow.com. If you have any
Support
questions,
at dyknow.com.
support at dyknow.com. And please reach out if you have any questions. We're happy to help. Anyone who's joining us today who's not currently a Dyknow customer, I encourage you to go to the Dyknow website, check it out, read a little bit more about what we do. We have resources on there for teachers, tech coaches, administrators, give you a little more information on Dyknow and product specific features that you can see up front. We are also offering Dyknow from a trial perspective through July 1st so that you can monitor your remote classrooms if you don't have a current classroom monitoring software or management software in place. Even if you're looking for those engagement tools and might not have those, Dyknow's a great resource, as Casey mentioned. So feel free to reach out to sales@dyknow.com for more information on that, and we would be happy to assist you in getting started with a trial. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Casey, for being with us. It doesn't look like we have any questions, so I think we'll wrap this up. Great conversation. Really appreciate you both being here, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
See
you.
you guys.
Bye.